for myself as a serious biologist, the topic of beauty, of course, has been something what I couldn't ever take seriously. That's nothing for true biology, I have thought always. So I'm surprising myself now that I am speaking about that, but there is really a reason. So first, of course, I never really took seriously all these social biological approaches where they say that beauty is sort of handicap feature, what's actually mostly now in popular biological literature and even scientific one. I just think that this is mainly a human eye for whom, say, these long tails and various strange forms look beautiful. Whether they look indeed beautiful for those species themselves, that has to be proved. So I have never seen the real proof for that. So therefore, I don't think that I cannot take it seriously. So nevertheless, I'd like to share some ideas now about this aesthetic qualities, because I think I touch in my now understanding something what may be productive. So let me try to now to share. How I can share here. Share screen. Share screen. Aha. Yes. Share. So play. Can you see this? Yes.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
So, I'd like to understand aesthetic from the point of view of those other organisms themselves. So, that means the beauty of the earthworm or whomever as it is now in a true deep sense. In many ways, semiotics is a field that is searching answers to very complex questions. And that is what is beauty is, obviously, I think, one of these. Interestingly, the nature of aesthetic hasn't been seen as a general problem in theoretical biology, even I would say, while it was at the same time important focus for several semioticians. For instance, Yuri Lotman's whole academic work was an attempt to answer the question, what is art? Or the problem of aesthetic was also rather central for Umberto Eco throughout his career. So I guess that beauty has been so marginal, really, in biology, because biology has lacked the proper tools to study aesthetic. And I'd like to argue that biosemiotics is namely the single area without which the nature of aesthetic cannot be resolved. In other terms, now let us investigate what else can be there a consequence of semiosis besides habit. So my hypothesis, or actually, point will be that tendency towards beauty is one of rather general features of semiosis, however, not so general as habitation. And that has been not so easy to discover because it is not reflected so well in arts. Say, art already sort of reverses or turns over this good tendency. But it can be seen now in pre-linguistic semiosis. So, what's aesthetic? Often it's said aesthetic qualities are defined as those that are sensibly attractive and experientially pleasing, but to whom? And that's not so easy to define anyhow and specify. However, we may also assume that achieving a better definition is itself a stepwise process and depends on the deepening of understanding the aesthetic. Now, maybe more to argue why at all to think about this problem, why it's important to study. First, the nature of aesthetic is not yet finally discovered, I would say. Most of the earlier work of aesthetic has been limited to humanities, assuming that the quality of beauty is related to human perception. But what's so human specific in case of beauty, it's actually not clear at all. Say the view or maybe implication of that it would really be that understanding of nature of beauty belongs to the area of biology. And second reason concerns the problem of nature of intrinsic value of life, as formulated in deep ecology by Arne Næss, which is still not ultimately resolved. It's reasonable to think that the life's value itself is of aesthetic nature. And third reason concerns the ways of how culture changes the earth. When people attempt to make their surrounding beautiful, they usually replace natural by artificial, by which nature is turned into culture and the richness of life becomes largely destroyed. Protection of native ecosystems often requires a shift in aesthetic preferences. The scientific arguments for the importance of biodiversity preservation are clearly insufficient, though this would be maybe effective only if they are supplied by aesthetic preferences and explanations. So now that bioaesthetic is currently in the air can be seen also from the approach called evolutionary aesthetics, which has received attention particularly in the last 2 decades. See here one edited volumes and then Rothenberg's Survival of the Beautiful and Richard Prum's The Evolution of Beauty are just some the most well-known examples. But there are also works in biosemiotic aesthetics, just some books, Andreas Weber's Biopoetics, Dario Martinelli's Zoomusicology, and Katya Mandoki's on bioaesthetics. And in addition, the whole row of very good papers by Harries-Jones on Bateson's ecological aesthetics, Tommi Vehkavaara on Persian aesthetics, Wendy Wheeler, Kate Rigby, of course, Portman's interpretations of Portman, and more. Which means the topic is not new. However, the solution I'm going to propose has some specifics, and this stems from how I currently understand semiosis. Now, closer to the point, here one important distinction I need is a distinction between aesthetic and artistic. So let artistic be defined as the willful aesthetic, that means specifically human, while in case of aesthetic of other species, we could say similarly to how we say about usage of science, they use science without knowing they're using science. Here the same thing, they do aesthetic without knowing they are doing aesthetic. Two assumptions from general aesthetic also important and needed. First, what is aesthetically valuable, that means what is considered beautiful is relative. Like culture dependent, or also dependent on historical period. This is well known, and this implies that aesthetic values are not universal. However, this may be rather well agreed or shared in a particular culture or in a particular era. Moreover, there are also individual differences also, of course. And now thus extending this concept of aesthetic values to other species, we can obviously conclude that aesthetic values are also relative in sense of species. They can be species specific. Each species may have its own aesthetic preferences. Now, and another point here is that in case of artwork, what gives value to it? The object is sensed to be aesthetically more valuable, usually, if it is valuable in many aspects of meaning. That means the multiplicity or meaningfulness or polysemy seems to be an important feature of beauty. There might be some exception, particularly in case of human aesthetics, but more on this a bit later. But now, let's start with the idea I'd like to convey, the general semiotic approach to aesthetics. And this starts now from definition of semiosis. So there are many definitions of semiosis. I think that's that's a little modification, but also not so new. Semiosis or interpretation is a creation and collapse of multiple possibilities. So possibilities are there due to semiosis, but semiosis also does something with this. It takes one interpretation. In that sense, the multiplicity of possibilities is collapsing in semiosis, via semiosis, due to semiosis. Here, I can also say this is what is happening there. Is something like choice in a general sense. I can also here refer to Jesper Hoffmeyer, that he has used the term choice in a similar way when saying that when a bacterial cell finds itself somewhere and can swim right instead of left, the cell is making a choice. Jesper's words. And that's not a single sentence where he's using exactly in that sense the word choice. But here I would also add a useful two little quotes from Barend von Huijsten. From his work, Aesthetic and Artistic Semiosis, a Persian Perspective. It is an abductive process in the overcoming of a semiotic contradiction by the creation of a new sign that the aesthetic dimension of semiosis can be located. And that means, you see, semiosis removes that incompatibility or contradiction, yeah, or the aesthetic dimension of semiosis is the dimension of the emerging sign. Say, what I like to point out here that what semiosis does has a certain directionality, slight directionality. So it removes incompatibility. That means, say, this is not random. This is not just choosing whichever. In a way, as if, but it changes in this way it as if keeps certain root in a very general sense. And that's now about what I would say this is now this aesthetic dimension. Now, also semiosis science processes are memory processes. Let me also define here semiotic memory. Semiotic memory is a trace from a choice that influences further choices. Trace from a choice that influences or frames or scaffolds the further choices. When we define it in so general way, we can also see that organic form in general is a part of semiotic memory. Some additional or corollaries here. What semiosis does now, it solves incompatibilities, it solves contradiction, it solves problems. Life is problem solving, as Karl Popper has formulated. Even in this way, a world, it's the title of one of his work, A World Without Natural Selection, but with problem solving. You can see here this strong, strongly, contrary to this Darwinian approach. Semiosis that modifies memory can solve a problem. Possibilities interfere each other. Semiosis removes that interference, at least for one period of functional cycle. If we think a functional cycle as a process, a physiological process, what is going on at semiosis. So, as Uexküll says, functional cycle is working until it deletes its source. Thus, a functional cycle is like self-rewarding or self-supervising learning, we can see here. Thus, and this is very important, what semiosis does has certain slight directionality. Semiosis is not going by chance, neither it is random. So by resolving, semiosis increases, we could say, certain fittedness. And here is some help from ecological phenomenon of fittedness. What is ecological fitting? That is a nice concept introduced by Daniel Janzen, who is a tropical ecologist studying Costa Rica ecosystems and trying to explain how and why species live together. And he says that while common explanation has been that those who are living together are just those species who have co-evolved during the long evolution, he says maybe not. It is commonly assumed that a pair of species whose traits are mutualistically congruent have co-evolved. For example, it is quite possible that the fruit traits of a mammal-dispersed seed co-evolved with the mammal's dietary needs. However, it is also quite possible that the mammal entered the plant's habitat with its dietary preferences already established and simply began feeding on the fruits of the species that fulfilled them. Searched and found. When this occurs, it is those species that are most exactly congruent which will appear most co-evolved, yet are likely to be the least co-evolved. And Daniel Janzen continues, a major part of the Earth's surface may be occupied largely by organisms that are rich in ecological interactions and have virtually no detailed evolutionary history with one another. So he's in this way introducing that idea of ecological fitting, which is not fitness at all. It's just organisms that fit to each other because they have found that everything works if they live together. So in several ways. So we can now generalize that concept of ecological fitting into semiotic fitting, and say, while looking at this ecological fitting is just one special case of that, and semiotic fitting is the agent's capacity of making and preserving the local semiotic bonds, meaning the agent's functional or communicational match with its surroundings. And obviously semiosis often leads to semiotic fitting. Semiotic fitting is also, we can see, not one step or a process. So it's not achieved in one act of semiosis, because there are many different interactions, interpretations that an agent has, and these cannot be realized all at once. So main statement, semiotic fitting is the fundamental aesthetic process. Because it is a result of removal of certain incompatibilities, and note that semiotic fitting is system dependent. It doesn't require human eye if humans are not part of the particular living system. So, semiotic fitting is a process in ecosystems or biological communities. There are very many aspects of living that should fit, including with many organisms and species. The longer a community can develop, the more relations, more aspects of fittedness it can achieve, which implies that the older communities are generally more rich, better fitted. That means more beautiful from the system's own perspective, of course. Like an old forest, old meadow, why not old city, and so on. But also, there are semiotic processes inside the organism, endosemiosis, which means the development of organism's own form is, at least some extent, the product of semiotic fitting, which means the organism's form, both inside and outside, is affected by the fundamental aesthetic process, the semiotic fitting. Well, think of beauty of construction and movement of any bird, of swallow. There is everything perfect, isn't it? Let me also ask Jacob von Uexküll for a help. He made important distinction between Anpassung and Einpassung. And this is precisely here, this, we could say that's Darwinian fitness, and which is Anpassung, and this fittedness via active search of agent as Einpassung. Jacob von Uexküll writes, the eye tone of an organism that acts in its specific umwelt is not the result of a gradual adaptation or Anpassung in evolutionary time, as Darwin thought, or the influence of the environment on the individual development of an organism, as Lamarck thought, but it is adjustment or fittedness, Einpassung. Uexküll also claims that every species is perfectly fitted to the world. That is his concept of Einpassung, because that happens relatively quickly, very quickly in comparison to evolutionary adaptation. Semiosis includes both perception and organic development. Both are interpretations, at least in some extent. It's what they share. Both are based on search and decision and memory modification. And both are iterative. That means many steps processes. Both are biohermeneutic, we could say. Thus, the perception and morphogenesis share the tendency towards semiotic fitting. That means both are involved in the aesthetic process. Thus, the forms one likes and the forms the life stepwise creates have some convergence, or which can be recognized as perfect, multidimensional, and multimodal fittedness, or ecological aesthetics, as Bateson says, or biopoetics, as Andreas Weber, or this is perfection and not progress. Now, on universality again, there is rightful saying that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Each beholder is individual. However, likewise, people, all organisms share something in their structure and processes. This is the scaffolding of memory that canalizes the choices one makes. Sharing the relations, that means memory, which is a product of experience, the form and development, is the basis of sharing of some aesthetic values. That's the basis of cultural specificity and also species specificity. Now, all living organisms share some basic cellular structure, metabolism, and basic needs, which means that there might be even some aesthetic qualities towards which most organisms tend to develop. Biologists almost never ask whether there is anything in common in the morphology of all organisms, because the diversity of organic forms is so vast. However, there is an architect who was brave enough to ask and to try to answer positively after to try to answer positively to the question whether there is something common in living forms, say, and that is Christopher Alexander. Many thanks to Murdine Anderson, who years ago paid our attention to his work. So, as an architect, he was brave enough to ask and to try to find out, after careful studies, the 15 features that are rather common to all living forms. Levels of scale, strong centers, boundaries, alternating repetition, positive space, good shape, local symmetries, deep interlock and ambiguity, contrast, gradients, roughness, echoes, void, simplicity, and inner calm, not separateness. So if he's right, if these are really almost clearly not absolute universals, but rather general features of organic forms, say, then why so? So if there is now such a deep aesthetic process coming from semiosis, say, then that can be a sort of, indeed, explanation, and then that's obvious that there can be this kind of common features in life's morphology. So these are his drawings just of these 15 features. Now, one more aspect here, just about the artistic, I would say, because say this difference between human understanding of aesthetic and other species still exists. There obviously exists, but this presumes some typology or maybe hierarchy of the aesthetic forms. Our very general account, the definition of beauty, will become simply more sensible if we add the dimension of the types of semiosis, which means this approach implies that there could be or would exist vegetative beauty, animal beauty, emotional beauty, rational beauty. Each of these creates the beautiful forms, while their characteristic features are rather different. We can very briefly just maybe characterize like this, that vegetative aesthetic imprints is going via imprinting which assimilates patterns, and animal aesthetic is association, which assimilates correlations. Empathic is imitation, which assimilates analogies and movements. And artistic now, that going more self-conscious, which can assimilate inconsistencies and contradictions. So, and in that way, going against, sometimes also against that deep aesthetic process. And everybody knows, of course, the contemporary art is not at all interested in beauty, mostly or mainly. Thus, an implication we arrive into is telling that while the animal and empathic aesthetic process strongly leads towards beauty, then in case of vegetative and willful aesthetic, we may see it a bit less. Less in case of vegetative because there are rather little capacities to influence memory. And less in case of willful artistic semiosis because there is too much memory and the purposes can be willfully changed. Now also maybe a little, or probably that's time over, yeah? What it is with time?
I think you're at time, but also this is kind of what we're all here for. So maybe we allow
just conclusion.
Yeah. We have an open discussion coming after, so
conclusion. Definition of beauty. Beauty is the perfect semiotic fittedness. As a result of semiotic fitting, which resolves incompatibilities there exists a tendency in the living nature towards becoming beautiful. In case of non-humans, it is always multi-contextual. In case of humans, it may also be decontextualized and say rather different. Beauty is species-specific. It includes all possible modalities. Thus, in order to live in a truly rich and valuable world, we should try to start from the biosemiotic aesthetic and try to understand the animal, fungal, vegetative beauty, the intrinsic beauty of life processes. Thank you very much for attention.